early on, I'm out there working and was working quite a few hours. She's born having 90-minute grand malls, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, work is not that important.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this installment of the Nick Speaks podcast, the podcast dedicated to the disabled community, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud. I am your host, Nicholas Comstock. You guys, for most of these episodes, you've heard a lot of my perspective as a disabled person in the community. We've had other interviews on with other people who work in the disabled community or who have worked. And today I'm really excited to have a parent's perspective on the show today. Also a fellow podcaster. Several weeks ago, I did an interview on his podcast, and it just recently came out, so we'll get into that. And I am so excited to have Aaron DeVries on my podcast, who's a parent of a daughter who has cerebral palsy, lives in Minnesota, and all that great stuff. So, Aaron, welcome to the program. Thank you so much for being on Nick Speaks.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick, for having me on. It was an honor to have you on my podcast, so I'm excited to be on yours as well.
Absolutely. So since I mentioned that right out the gate, why don't you go ahead and tell folks what your podcast is and how they can find it, and then we'll get into learning about you and your story.
Sure. So yeah, my name is Aaron DeVries. My podcast is called The Inclusive Dad, so just the word "the" Inclusive Dad. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all the places. So just look up my name, Aaron DeVries, DeVries, The Inclusive Dad, and it should come up. But yeah, I just talk about inclusion. I talk with people with disabilities, parents of people with disabilities. There's some of them have been more in the inclusion space. Also, we're more just maybe like corporate diversity, equity, inclusion, that side of it also, because I feel like it kind of all fits together. So it's been great talking with people such as yourself about their experiences and their perspectives on inclusion and raising awareness.
Yeah, it's been awesome. It has been totally awesome. Thrilled to meet you through a podcast swap, and we've just been getting to know each other, and this will not be the last time we meet. It's just been thrilling to get to listen to your podcast and hear your experience. So I'm really glad we've connected today. So, Aaron, why don't you start off by telling the viewers and the listeners, like, you have a daughter who is 22 years old, who has cerebral palsy. And one of the questions I have for you is, what was that like when you found out that your daughter was not going to be, quote unquote, normal as deemed in society? What was that like for you?
So yeah, my daughter Cecilia, we call her Cece, is 22. So at 3 months old, we found out she was staring off to the side from some aunts who were nurses. So went to Mayo Clinic. So we live in Minnesota, around 45 minutes from Rochester, where Mayo Clinic is located. Had some appointments. What I remember about it, she's 22, so it was a while ago. I remember, being there for appointments, finding out that she had epilepsy or was having seizures, then epilepsy diagnosis. For me, I don't really remember a lot of feelings of, this is, my life's not going to be the same or any of those things. Like, this is going to really, change things for me. I don't remember that. So if I went through that, I don't remember those things. For me, more, it was just okay, I have a son that's 15 months older. So I had him, and then she was born. And then she's my daughter. Whatever it takes for me to, help her out, give her a good life like I want to give my son. That's what I'm going to do. So I don't recall a lot of, those feelings, at least initially, of oh crap, what's this mean? Was my life, just completely different than I thought it was going to be kind of thing. So I don't recall that kind of stuff. This is when I wish I don't do any like journaling or writing. And this is kind of when I wish I would have done it. So I can like in these situations kind of remember more about, the feelings I was going through. But looking back, I don't remember a lot of like negative feelings attached to it. It was just, this is my life. I'm her dad. That doesn't change the fact that she's my daughter. I'm going to do what I can to be the best that I can be. And that, it's going to look different, obviously, because of, what she's going to need help with or how I'm going to have to parent her. But it's just, I'm still her dad, just like I'm her, her brother's dad. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. So did you, as she got older, did you struggle with, as she went through the changes of life like everyone else, did you struggle with her did she deal with any like depression or anything about, the disability? And how did you handle that if she wasn't handling the disability well? How did you help her navigate those times?
I guess there's not, I don't recall any, depression, anything like that related directly to disability. So that never came up where she has verbalized to me, she feels different and that kind of thing. I can see it. As a parent, you can kind of tell when people, it's more probably me of like being aware of for Al, like people around her, how they're interacting with her more, than her, relaying stuff to me. So more just, if you're out and somebody seems a little apprehensive around her, just try to jump in a little bit and like, this is my daughter, Cece. Because she's in a wheelchair. So oftentimes younger kids, especially, they're super curious because they've never seen like a power wheelchair before. And they're like, can I come up there and touch it? And the parents like, is it okay? I'm like, yeah, it's cool. So just more, helping in those situations of trying to help her fit in, or people haven't been around it, that part of it. But if you're talking to her and you're, having the conversation, treating her nicely, she's pretty cool with pretty much anybody or that kind of stuff. So it's more just that kind of thing that I help with. And like I said, she never verbalized to me the depression. I can tell sometimes where, if people around you are depressed, they pick up on that, but she never verbalized like, because I'm this way, I'm depressed because I can't do kind of stuff. So.
Right. Right. That's funny you mentioned, Aaron, about kids wanting to come up and touch the chair. I have to remember all the time to touch my chair off or turn it off. As first thing they want to touch is the joystick.
Right. Yep.
The lights, and they see everything, and it's just like, I don't want to flying because kids are going to treat it like a joystick, like a game, like a video game joystick.
Right.
So first thing I do is shut the chair off. Yeah, and kids are curious too, and kids will come up to me and was like, especially like if they're 4 or 5 years old, they'll be like, "How did you get that owie? What's wrong?" Just explain, this is just the lot in life that I've been given, and it's okay. And kids are so innocent and genuine, and they're like,
yeah,
I pray that you get better. And I'm like, oh,
right.
Yeah. So what are some things that you've done as a parent? You talk about inclusivity a lot. What are some things that you've done as a parent to make sure that your daughter is included as much as possible, from school to anything you do in the community? What are some things that you've done as a parent to try to make her included?
Sure. I guess just in the community in general is just, if we go somewhere, we just take her with us. It sounds simple and obvious, but I've had multiple times, more than once, where people are like, "Oh, it's so nice you bring her to the fair. And it's like, yeah, I mean, she's my daughter. I'm taking my son to the fair. Why is it odd that, what's prompting you to say that about her and not my son? So, I mean, just having her out in the community, I would be the answer to that part. Just as far as school goes, that's kind of where my inclusion journey started. I mean, I don't recall the word disability being used growing up, being around anybody in wheelchairs. So she was diagnosed. Get like early intervention comes in. And also something about my background is I was taught not to really question, like doctors, teachers, people with those kind of jobs. So just kind of went along with it, which meant she was sent to the segregated classroom across town. In early grades, found out about inclusion, tried to get her back in gen ed, basically her whole school career. So that the school part was I feel more difficult than the community. I mean, the community seemed more from my perspective, I can bring her anywhere basically. So just take her out. Like, what do you like, do something, ask for forgiveness later kind of thing. You just do it and, that kind of part of it. Whereas school is more, entrenched in their ideas of what inclusion is or isn't. And, from my experience, at least, I'm not sure about yours, just if the administration or the upper level management is not on the same level with your definition of inclusion, it's just it's a struggle trying to, get that inclusion happening. At least for us, it was. So just, going to IEP meetings, trying to move the needle on the inclusion piece. She was always in choir music, so making sure she's able to attend the events. I mean, you go to grade school concerts in the gym, she's on the end of the risers, not by her class, ask questions, the teacher, like, and why was she over there, not in front of the risers where her class?
Yeah, right.
So just it's a lot of
sore thumb.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a lot of just advocating, the squeaky wheel, just always asking questions. Something doesn't make sense, bring it up. I mean, there's multiple, at least one or two times where it was, she's at a concert. There's no para. We're not going to be able to have a para here to, get her out on stage. Are you able to like get her out there? And as a parent, like, I shouldn't have to do this, but I want her to participate. So there was more than once at a high school concert where I, helped get her out in position on the stage so she could do her thing. So, I mean, and another part of that is I've done 2 TEDx talks. The first one was 10 years ago, shortly after she was in choir back then also, and they had a concert at a historic theater in town, which wasn't accessible, the stage. So I ended up having to pick her up out of her wheelchair, walk her up the steps, put her in a chair we had placed on the stage so she could sing, and then got her back down.
Ridiculous.
So that also happened. Good update on that is actually, so it's early December when we're recording this, and yesterday it was publicly announced that the Hormel Foundation, we live in the town where Hormel is located, gave $3 million to renovate that theater to make the stage finally accessible 10 years later. So,
wow.
So, I mean, but that stuff like that, and I mean, that people remember that. I joined the committee to help, renovate the building this time, and I introduced myself, and somebody said, yeah, I remember you carrying her up there. So just like I started this off with, just being out in the community, getting her out there, just being what I feel is just doing normal dad stuff.
Yeah.
And stuff.
And I really think that it's important for parents with children with disabilities to be strong advocates, because if you're not a strong advocate, then your son or daughter with a disability, they're going to feed off you. So if you're not a strong advocate, then they're not going to be a strong advocate. And then especially if they're nonverbal or can't speak up for themselves, and you're not a strong advocate, your kid's going to be in trouble. So it's very important to ask questions, even though doctors and therapists don't really like that coming from me or from a parent with a person with a disability. I was told here in my county, I have a case manager, and I'm sure your daughter does if she has service. Here in my county, I was told that I was considered a difficult case just because I pushed the envelope and I asked questions. No, I know this is not the way it's supposed to be. I know these are the services that I'm entitled to. You're not telling me just because you want to save $1. I get it that we have to be fiscally responsible, but we also, if we want to have, functioning members of society who are disabled, we also have to look at the ways we do things and say, maybe the cookie cutter way isn't the best. We need to figure this out. And if it takes spending a little bit more money than what we planned, then we need to learn to budget better.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense to me too. Like I said, I didn't really question doctors or teachers, and then you figure out stuff happens. You're like, wait a second, they're humans like me. I can ask them questions. They're not going to maybe like that I'm asking questions because I don't think they should be asked questions. But I'm her parent. I know her best. I'm around her most of the day. I know her way more than they do. They see her for short periods of time. So I mean, but as a parent, you're in a smaller town. I mean, it's not super small, but you have to weigh how much do I want to push? How mad do I want to make them? Is this a, burn the place down kind of a problem? Or is it just, let this go for now because something else is more important? So for me, at least, it was always, you're weighing, how far do I push? Do I want to, you know what I mean? But I have crazy stories about, one story I have is she had 90-minute grand mal seizures when she was younger. So long, really long seizures. And one time they couldn't stop it, so they came and gave her medicine, going to push it in IV, and the doctor's like, well, we have to do it over 5 minutes, otherwise it's going to burn her veins. So that time they did it slowly, pushed it in manually into the IV. The next time she had a long seizure, they were going to do the same thing, and the nurse took the needle, and I'm like, hold on a second. I'm like, what just happened? The last time we were here, they did it over 5 minutes because they were going to burn her vein. This time you just took it and shoved it right into the IV. So either last time you did it too slowly, or this time you just burned her veins out. So what happened? They were not happy with me, but I'm like, I don't care. I'm her dad. If something was different, which one was right, which one was wrong, because we need to figure it out. Either we need to do it slowly and not hurt her, or if we could have done it faster last time, why didn't we? So, yeah, and just stuff like that where it's what just happened? But part of that too, I think, is that she was having so many seizures. I mean, you never get used to a seizure, somebody having a seizure, but I was numb enough to some of it where I was able to pay attention more. Because early on when you're in the moment, I mean, I wasn't paying attention as much, but after a while you kind of get well, I'm in the yard and okay, that part isn't super surprising. So you kind of pay more attention. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think has been the hardest thing for you as a parent to watch your daughter go through?
It's a great question. What comes to mind to me is just, it's more about, I'm not sure if she feels this way, but just for me, just because somebody, has something in their life, like her, she's in a wheelchair, she has disabilities. It really is upsetting that just because of, those types of things, you're put into a certain silo. She was sent to this program, just because of those certain, I mean, it's not just that. It's if you're, African American, sometimes you're viewed certain ways, how we, because of somebody, how we view them, they're, put into this silo or treated. That's to me is the most frustrating. Why are we doing that kind of thing? Just for her, she's pretty happy-go-lucky if she's, you're, like I said, you're paying attention to her, including her in the conversations, having fun around her. She's good. It's just, for me as a parent more, it's just, why are you treating her that way just because she has a wheelchair or you don't think she understands what you're saying and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so that's a good point that you bring up. So like when I know that you've said many times on your podcast, which again, I will encourage people to check out, which is the Inclusive Dad, and you can find it on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. One of the things that you've mentioned constantly is that you go to your daughter's doctor's appointments, which I think is something that I struggled with when I was in my late teens, early adult years. Is my mom would go with me to my doctor's appointments.
Okay.
And instead of the doctor talking to me, they would talk to my mom like I wasn't in the room.
Sure.
So I know, and I'm able to speak well, but I know that you said your daughter has a communication device. So do you find it that they speak to you more instead of her, or is it kind of 50-50, or do they really include her in the conversations?
So yeah, we tried doing a communication device with her early on. She just didn't go for that. So she currently does not have one. I kind of say she's somewhat nonverbal. Like I can understand her, and like
Sure.
if she's like taking deep breaths and like taking her time, she's pretty easy to understand. So at the doctor appointments, it's been more so recently, I would say the last year or two, where she's wanted to, you get up to the check-in, what's your name, what's your birthday, where she's wanted to, answer those questions before we would just do it. So now that I know that she wants to, I will, and it's actually gotten better recently where they'll ask her, look at her and ask her the question. But it hasn't always been that way. So if they don't ask her, I just kind of redirect like, hey, CC, you tell them your name and your birthday. But so that part has gotten better in the actual room. Like I said, more recently, she wants to answer more of those questions. So if they start asking me, like, again, I'll redirect. I think it's got, like I said, gotten a lot better. So I'm not sure, maybe they're doing more education for medical staff around that, or I'm not sure, but more recently, from my experience, it's gotten better, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because I know that a lot of people in my position struggle with that. And so that's good that it's getting better, and it's good that she's wanting to ask those questions. Another question I want to ask you, Aaron, is what do you think, what are some of the lessons that your daughter has taught you through the process of just life?
So I mean, one of the lessons I mean, I don't know if you'd say she taught me, but just, her being born and the experiences surrounding that, I guess, taught me is just as a male. I'm not sure exactly where I learned, felt like this was a thing, but early on, I felt like as a, I grew up Baptist. We talked about this, I think. I don't know if it was on camera or off camera, but I grew up Baptist, so a lot of it was I'm the male of the house. Her mom and I were married at the time, so I'm the male. I need to make the money, blah blah blah, that whole spiel. So early on, I'm out there working, and was working quite a few hours. She's born having 90-minute grand malls, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, being at work is not that important, because what if I'm working and she, if I'm working all the time, not spending time with her? What? I'm sorry.
Did you say 90-minute seizures?
Yeah, she's had multiple 90-minute grand mal seizures.
What?
Yeah, like whole body convulsing.
Not that.
Yeah. So yeah, she had more than one of those, and was airlifted, but from Austin to Rochester via helicopter. So when that's going on, I'm like, okay, I don't want to be a person where I'm working all the time. Something happens, and I, didn't have the time with her. So early on, I was like, okay, this whole work thing, like that's not the most important thing. I'm going to work because I have to pay bills, but that's not going to be my focus. So that's one thing pretty early on that I figured out. Another thing that happened kind of related to similar, kind of came up the same way, was that I realized that how I coped with things, I would try to wrap my brain around like what's the worst possible scenario. So if I could wrap my brain around like, okay, what's the worst thing that could happen in this situation? And I could come to grips with that at least mentally at the time. That's how I dealt with stuff until one time I was driving from Austin to Rochester after she was going to go in a helicopter. So usually once we found out like she's going via helicopter, one of us would stay with her in the ER in Austin. One of us would take off, get in the car and drive with her because it's like 45 minutes via car, but like a couple minutes via helicopter. So one of us would try to get there so we could be there when she got there. So as I was driving down the interstate, I was like, okay, so my coping strategy isn't going to work in this situation because I have to wrap my brain around her, possibly dying, which I couldn't do. So I'm like, hold on a second. I need to come up with a different coping mechanism besides that one. So that was another lesson I learned. Another thing she's taught me is that, like I said, she loves music and singing. So we went to church a lot when she was younger, and she would love she'd in there just belting out the songs, just the hymns, just praising God. And I just look over her and I'm like, she's got it so right. She's like, she doesn't care what people think how she's singing. Like me, I won't sing like that because I'm worried about how I sound and
Right.
if that part of it. So just the pureness and innocent in
Your heart.
of her heart, that part of it. So those are kind of the things that come to mind, just where it's like you look over and it's like, man, she's got it all right. And I wish I could be that in the moment, pure and stuff like that in that way. So
Yeah. It's good that you brought up church. So how many times has people come up to your daughter or come up to you and they're like, can I pray for your daughter? Hey,
yeah,
that we need to be fixed. And I appreciate the prayers.
right.
Like after a while, it gets.
Yeah, I mean it's happened like multiple times. I mean it's an interesting. I mean I'm her dad, so I'm not her. So it was more of like for me it was more like I don't know. It was awkward, but it was like, okay, I understand they have good intentions. And like you hear the whole thing about the giving and receiving piece. Like if somebody wants to give you something, and I don't want it, sometimes you kind of take the gift because it's the giving part for them is good too. So like I kind of had this push pull of like, it's kind of awkward, but I know they have good intentions. They want to try. That's their way of trying to help, kind of thing. So it more or less would just go with it. But I mean, I do remember those. Sometimes it would be like super long prayers. They weren't like usually short prayers. It was like we're talking long ones. And then you're standing there like, oh my gosh, is this gonna like end at some point? Or
Yeah, praying against all the devils and
yeah,
people in China, and yes, I get that. So yeah, folks, we appreciate the prayers, but if they're gonna be long prayers, maybe you should send them in a letter or a text or something. That way we can.
well, and usually too, they put hands on her too, right? Is that your experience? Really,
Yeah.
put hands on you.
Yeah, they laid their hands. Well, Baptists typically don't do that.
No, that was not a Baptist church.
It's more of a Pentecostal thing,
Yeah.
and I'm what I call a Baptist-costal because I go to a church now, so I'm a transplant, so Baptist-costal. But yeah, just having to have these prayers all the time, and then making people understand, like, yes, I appreciate the prayers, and I believe for my healing, and I believe that God will do it anytime. But you know what? He may not do it in this lifetime. It may be, once we get to the other side. And if that happens like that, I'm okay. Either way, I'm okay. But it's like some people, it's like, this is an attack from the enemy and this is not okay, and
Right. Yeah.
This wheelchair's keeping you from your destiny. Well, really? No, it's not. Because,
Right.
it's for whatever reason, it's been God's will for this long for, me to be in a wheelchair and for your daughter to be in a wheelchair. And I wish that would be something that people could accept, especially these hardcore, I think it's more so in the Pentecostal church, these hardcore Pentecostals that are like, God doesn't want you sick and
Right.
you're supposed to be healed and health wealthy. But anyway, that's a whole nother episode. But it's just it I get it, and I appreciate the sentiments, and some of it I agree with it, some of it I don't.
Right.
But we don't need to be fixed. We're good. Isn't that, do you just want to grab some people as a parent and be like, my daughter doesn't need to be fixed. She's fine.
Yeah. I mean, that does come up for sure. Then now I'm just thinking you're talking like we don't do that for other, things, minority type things. I mean, you don't yeah, do like other things. So it's kind of interesting. Why is that the one where people do that, I guess?
Yeah. So, I talk a lot about Aaron about, parents need to make plans for their special needs child's future because, you're not always going to be around.
Yep.
So what plans, if any, if you feel comfortable sharing, like, has your daughter expressed, I know she's only 22, but has your daughter expressed about wanting to live on her own or live in some type of group setting or
yeah, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit. She sometimes expresses she wants to live on her own and that kind of thing. She lives with her mom, who's her guardian, and does most of that stuff. So I'm not highly involved in it, so I don't have a lot of insight into it. But I mean, she talks about wanting to live on her own. So she aged out of the transition piece of the education in October because she turned 22. So trying to figure out next steps of that. She wants to take a class at the local community college. We got into that process a little bit more, and now she needs to take an AccuPlacer test to be able to take the class. So we're not certain that she's going to be able to score high enough on that, to do it. So then we got that layer on top of it. So I guess to answer the question, we don't have a lot figured out as far as plans. I mean, the younger school stuff was frustrating to me on the inclusion piece, but there was at least something there. And now it's a lot more kind of up in the air, I guess, to me. There's not as much structure, as much, things that I feel anyway that I've seen. So not a lot of plans figured out yet.
Yeah. Do you have any major fears of her living on her own or living without a parent around?
So the short answer is yes. So I've worked, I mean, part of it I feel like is, I mean, I have some personal things probably I need to work through in that regards because I feel like I'm getting better at it, but I feel like if I'm around her, she's going to be safer taken care of. And I have some of that I have to kind of let go of because I'm not going to be around forever. But at the same time, I mean, I've worked in a children's mental health residential facility in town. So kids 5 years to 18 in that kind of a setting where it's residential. I mean, I've seen stuff that should have never seen regarding how staff treat, people in those positions. I've worked in what would be I mean, it was a group home, so I was in charge of 2 group homes. Each one of them only had 1 resident based on the level of needs they had and just how, for me, it's highly, I'm passionate about it. You need to treat them a certain way. I saw staff not treating them the way thought they should be treated. So just some of that stuff brings in a lot of, I mean, I know it could be good. And if the staff is correct and, good and they got the right intentions, it could work well. It's just I've seen some stuff where I have a lot of apprehension about, placing her in a spot where if somebody has the wrong intentions or isn't there for the right reasons, it can turn out badly. So, I mean, it scares the crap out of me, but I know I'm not going to be around forever. So trying to like balance that whole, which part is just my unhealthy fear about stuff and which part is reality I need to kind of get a better handle on, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I understand. It's not well, it's good that she is expressing that she wants to,
Right.
you know, live on her own, and it's good that she's expressing that she's wanting to be independent. Did you and her mom, try to push her to be as independent as possible, or did it just come naturally to her?
Um, I would say it's probably more came naturally to her. If I'm being completely honest, I feel like I personally, um, I'm just gonna sound bad saying out loud, but I feel like I probably, no, I didn't, and I didn't probably, I babied her more than I should have. I probably should have pushed her more than I did. Part of it was the epilepsy piece, just the scaring part of the seizures. So always being near her, watching for seizures, which we kind of translated to school. We need a one-on-one, we need a pair with her to watch for that, which then kind of, how do you do that? And, let her, build independence, but keeping her safe part of it. So I feel like we probably should have done stuff a little differently where she was more on her own, trying out stuff at the same time, people watching from more of a distance. So, you can't go back and change things, but I feel like we probably should have pushed a little more independence younger, if I'm being honest.
Oh, sure. I think a lot of parents struggle with that because they hear the word disability and they automatically think, oh, this this child is fragile. They're gonna break any moment. And I understand the fear. I mean, I'm not a parent. Don't know if I'll ever become a parent, but I understand the fear. But be rest assured, your child is not going to break.
Right.
Uh, uh, having them do what they can for themselves as much as they can is the best.
Right.
The best that you could do for them, and the best that you could do for yourself, because you're not always going to be around forever. And as I say all the time, uh, they're not going to want you around forever. So you have to come with a happy medium of, okay, what do I show them to do on their own? What do I do for them without getting in their way and not allowing them to live their life, So it has to, there has to be a balance, is what I'm trying.
Right. For sure.
Oh, yeah. This is the first time that I've actually had a fellow podcaster on my podcast.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, what inspired you to start your podcast, and why did you start it?
That's a good question. I, for a while, had thought about me. Well, actually, 2018, if you go look at my stuff, if you go back to the bottom, I recorded a couple episodes early or in 2018 and just stopped. I don't remember what happened, but this year I was on a couple of podcasts and I had, in a short period of time, less than a month, somebody's like, hey, you should start a podcast. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. I thought about it. Second one happened. I'm like, that's a little weird. Third one, I'm like, okay, sounds good. I'm getting the hint universe that I should do that. So just that kind of happened. And then I just threw it out there as a idea on Threads. Just like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast about inclusion. Anybody interested? And they had 70 people say they were interested. So just had a lot of interest. Like just kind of was in a spot where, these doors seem to be opening. Seems like the path. Let's go down and see what happens. So just, honestly, that's how I got it started. Just wanting to talk about inclusion. Once I started, interviewing people, I had people like, this is awesome. I'm so glad you are talking about this. It's given me, made me realize that I can talk about some stuff that I hadn't been talking about, that part of it. So just, people wanting to share stories, people, were encouraged to share their stories, that part of it. So just that's kind of why I'm doing it, why I'm getting the word out there, spreading the word about inclusion, and that piece of it.
Yeah, and I would say too, before we wrap up, it would be, podcast is the new TV, it's the new radio, it's
Mm-hmm.
regular TV is phasing out as we know it. And, you know, for those of you that are parents that are saying, I want my child involved, I want people to treat my child as normal as possible, I don't want them to blow my child off. One of the ways that you can help do that is by starting a blog, starting a podcast, starting a YouTube channel, getting on TikTok, showing your daily lives and say, people with disabilities are normal and maybe kind of normal than what you're used to seeing, but this we struggle with, because long gone are the days where people shouldn't be able to say anymore, I don't know how to talk to people with disabilities.
Right.
I don't know how to deal with people with disabilities because they're flooded with resources. And if you're out there and you have a son or daughter with a disability, or you're listening and you have a disability, and you're like, I want to be involved in my community. Well, social media is the way for people with disabilities to do it. And it's an excellent way for parents with disabilities to build support groups with people that maybe have similar disabilities or totally different.
Yep.
As it really does, you've heard the phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it really does take a village when you're dealing with, somebody who has a disability, and not everybody has to deal with that. We're a very special group of people, no matter what disability it is. So it's nice to have that village out there. Before we leave, this is the last thing I'll ask you is just, where can people find you? How can they get in touch with you if they want to reach out? And we'll put it in the show notes as well. But I want people to be able to reach out to you and find your podcast. And if they want to reach out to you as a parent and just connect with you, how can they do that, Aaron?
The easiest place is probably just go to the website, just theinclusivedad.com. And then I'm on Facebook under The Inclusive Dad, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm not sure if all of them are all the same, the Inclusive Dad part, or just Aaron DeVries. Look me up on all this stuff, or just go to the website, The Inclusive Dad.
Awesome. And you guys can also check out my stuff too if you're interested on being on the show or just want to reach out. You can reach out to me at nickspeaksofficial@gmail.com. You can also watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Nicholas Comstock. Follow me on TikTok at Nicholas Comstock, and also listen to this podcast on Apple and Spotify, and watch it on my YouTube channel. I covered that already. Well, thank you so much for being on Nick Speaks, Aaron. I am so happy to have you, and thank you for taking your time today to do so. I really appreciate it. We'll have to come back for a couple other episodes and talk about crazy religion and all that type of stuff, because that would be fun. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was an honor.
Absolutely. And guys, remember, this is the Nick Speaks podcast, dedicated to the disabled community, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud. And I will see you next week. Thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.